The clinking of silverware on porcelain was the only music Julian Croft cared for. It was the sound of success, of deals being closed over $300 steaks and vintage Bordeaux. Tonight, the symphony was particularly sweet at Aria, a restaurant so exclusive its name was whispered like a password. Across from him, Chloe Ryland, with her sharp wit and even sharper ambition, laughed, her eyes catching the low, intimate light. She was a beautiful, calculated risk, a thrilling diversion from the quiet predictability his life had become. He felt a familiar, intoxicating surge of power, the master of his universe, orchestrating every detail. Until he saw her. The air in Aria was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. Julian swirled the deep crimson liquid in his glass, the 2005 Chateau Margaux a familiar comfort. "So, the Nakatomi deal," he said, his voice a low, confident hum. "They think they have us cornered. They don't realize we already own the patent on the processor they need." Chloe leaned forward, her silk blouse shimmering. "You're a shark, Julian. A very handsome, well-dressed shark." Her hand found his on the table, her touch electric and deliberate. She was an associate from a rival firm, and their affair was a dangerous, exhilarating game of corporate espionage and forbidden pleasure. It was a game Julian was certain he was winning. He was about to respond, to escalate the flirtation, when a shadow fell over their table. "Good evening. My name is Elena, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you with some water for the table?" The name. The voice. It was a phantom limb, an echo from a different life. Julian's head snapped up. His blood ran cold, turning the expensive wine to ash in his mouth. It was her, his Elena. His wife. But it wasn't the Elena he'd left that morning in their sterile, minimalist mansion, the one with sad eyes and a quiet resignation he'd grown to resent. This Elena was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting black uniform, a small, laminated name tag pinned crookedly to her chest. Her beautiful auburn hair was pulled back in a severe, functional ponytail. But it was the gentle, unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the thin fabric that shattered Julian's world. Pregnant. She was visibly, undeniably pregnant. His mind reeled. He'd known, of course, but seeing it here, in this context, felt like a physical blow. The irony was a blade twisting in his gut. The millionaire tycoon, dining with his mistress, being served by his pregnant wife. He froze. The suave, powerful Julian Croft evaporated, replaced by a hollowed-out man caught in the unforgiving spotlight of his own deceit. The sounds of the restaurant, the gentle murmur of conversations, the distant clatter from the kitchen, faded into a roaring silence in his ears. He could only see her eyes. They weren't accusing or fiery with rage. They were worse. They were tired, exhausted. And for a fleeting, terrifying moment, they held a flicker of something he hadn't seen in years. Pity. Pity for him. "Julian, are you okay?" Chloe's voice was a sharp intrusion. Her manicured fingers tightened on his. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He couldn't speak. His throat was a knot of shame and panic. Elena's professional smile didn't waver, but her eyes held his for a fraction of a second too long, a silent acknowledgement that stripped him bare. She knew. Of course, she knew. She turned her gaze to Chloe, the smile remaining plastered on her face. "And for you, miss?" Chloe, oblivious, ordered sparkling water with lime. But her focus was on Julian. She was sharp, analytical. She knew something was wrong, and her mind was already working, connecting invisible dots. Elena moved with a practiced, weary efficiency, her body language a testament to long hours on her feet. She returned with their water, placing the glasses down with a steady hand. Every simple, graceful movement was an indictment. He remembered a time when those hands had sketched architectural designs, her true passion, a career she'd put on hold to support his burgeoning empire. He had promised her the world, a partnership. Instead, he had given her a golden cage, and now, it seemed, she had finally decided to fly, even if it was into a storm. "Will you be needing a few moments to decide on your appetizers?" Elena asked, her tone impeccably neutral. Julian finally found his voice, a strangled, unfamiliar sound. I'm not feeling well. We have to go." He threw a few $100 bills onto the table, enough to cover a meal they hadn't touched. He stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the polished floor, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Julian, what is going on?" Chloe demanded, her voice a low hiss of confusion and embarrassment. He didn't answer. He couldn't look at Elena again. He grabbed Chloe's arm, his grip too tight, and practically dragged her from the restaurant. As they burst out into the cool night air, the valet scrambling to retrieve his car, Julian felt a profound, suffocating sense of vertigo. He hadn't just been caught. He had been exposed. The carefully constructed facade of his life, the power, the control, the success, had been revealed for what it was, a fragile, glittering lie. And the truth, in a cheap polyester uniform, was back in that restaurant, carrying his child and the weight of his betrayal. The drive was a blur of neon lights and suffocating silence. The sleek leather interior of his Aston Martin, usually a cocoon of power, felt like a coffin. Chloe sat rigid in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, the scent of her expensive perfume mingling with the stench of Julian's panic. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" she finally asked, her voice dangerously calm. "You humiliated me in there." "I told you I felt sick," Julian lied, the words tasting like poison. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Don't insult my intelligence, Julian," she snapped. "You knew that waitress. The way you looked at her. Who is she?" He stayed silent, his mind a chaotic whirlwind. He saw Elena's face, not as the tired waitress, but as the vibrant young woman he'd met a decade ago. She was an architecture student, full of fierce opinions and brilliant ideas. He was a driven, hungry software developer with a fledgling company and a dream. She hadn't been impressed by his ambition. She'd been captivated by his passion. They'd spent hours in cheap coffee shops, her sketching designs on napkins, him coding on his bulky laptop. She was his foundation, the one who believed in him before the world did. "She looked pregnant," Chloe pushed, her voice methodical, piecing it together. "Julian, who is she?" "She's no one," he said, the lie weaker this time. "Elena," Chloe mused, testing the name. "That's your wife's name, isn't it? I saw it on a plaque at that charity gala. Julian and Elena Croft." Her voice was sharp with dawning comprehension. The thrill of the affair curdled into the bitter reality of being the other woman. A pawn in a game far more personal than she'd imagined. Oh my God, that was your wife. The confirmation hung in the air, a toxic radioactive cloud. "We're having problems," Julian mumbled, as if that explained everything. "Problems?" Chloe let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "It looks like your problems are about 7 months pregnant and serving shrimp cocktails to your mistress. What kind of monster are you?" The accusation, coming from her, was almost comical in its hypocrisy, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. He dropped her off at her apartment with a terse, empty promise to call her later. He knew he wouldn't. The game was over. As he drove away, he was utterly alone, trapped in the echo chamber of his own guilt. He didn't go home. He couldn't face the quiet accusation of their house, a monument to their shared history and his recent neglect. He drove aimlessly, the city lights smearing into a watercolor mess through his blurred vision. Why was she working there? They didn't need the money. He'd built an empire. He provided everything. Everything. The word mocked him. He'd provided a house, but not a home. He'd provided luxury, but not companionship. He'd provided financial security, but stripped her of her purpose. He remembered the arguments, subtle at first, then more frequent. "I feel like all I do is wait for you, Julian," she'd said a few months ago, her voice small in their cavernous living room. "You have everything you could ever want, Elle. Most women would kill for this life," he'd replied, dismissive, checking emails on his phone. "I don't want this life. I want a life. My life. I want to work. I want to design again." "You don't need to. I've got it covered. Just relax. Enjoy it. For me." He had seen her desire for independence as a criticism of his success. He'd wanted a beautiful, placid wife to adorn his perfect life, not a partner with ambitions that might complicate it. He'd systematically, unconsciously, chipped away at her identity until all that was left was Mrs. Julian Croft. And she had rebelled. Taking a job as a waitress wasn't about money. It was a desperate, silent scream for autonomy. An act of defiance he had been too self-absorbed to notice. He finally pulled over, the engine humming in the darkness of a deserted lookout point overlooking the city. He was a fraud. The powerful CEO, the master of the universe, was a man whose own wife had to hide her life from him. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He had not only betrayed her with another woman, he had betrayed the man she had fallen in love with. That passionate, driven man had been replaced by this hollow shell, this caricature of success. Meanwhile, back at Aria, Elena finished her shift. She moved through the end-of-night rituals with a heavy, deliberate grace. She wiped down tables, her mind 1,000,000 miles away. She had imagined this moment 100 times, imagined screaming, throwing a tray, exposing him in a fiery torrent of righteous anger. But when it happened, all she felt was a profound, hollowing sadness. The anger had burned out long ago, leaving behind the cold embers of disappointment. She had taken this job 3 months ago, after the fight about her wanting to work. She'd used her maiden name to apply, a small act of reclaiming herself. The physical labor was humbling, exhausting, but it was hers. The small paycheck, which she tucked away in a private account, was the most valuable money she had ever earned. It was her escape fund, her seed of a new beginning for her and her baby. Seeing Julian with that woman hadn't broken her heart. It had merely confirmed what she already knew in her soul. The man she had married was gone. The man sitting at that table was a stranger, a collection of expensive suits and shallow desires. When she had looked at him, frozen in his chair, she hadn't seen the powerful man the world saw. She had seen a lost, frightened boy, terrified of being seen for what he truly was. And in that moment, her resolve hardened. She wasn't just doing this to prove a point anymore. She was doing this to survive. She clocked out, walked past the sympathetic glances of her co-workers, and stepped out into the night, one hand resting protectively on her belly. She didn't look back. Julian finally stumbled home as dawn painted the sky in shades of gray and pale pink. The house was silent, but it was a loud, accusatory silence. A suitcase was standing by the door. Not hers. His. It was a simple, elegant leather weekender, the kind he took on business trips. Next to it, on the polished console table, was her wedding ring. The sight of the ring, a flawless diamond he had once placed on her finger with so many promises, was more devastating than any shouted words could have been. He walked numbly through the house. Everything was in its place, clean and sterile, but her presence was gone. It was just a collection of expensive objects again. He found her in the nursery they had been designing together. Or rather, the room he had been designing, hiring the best interior decorator, choosing a palette of muted, sophisticated grays that now seemed funereal. She was sitting in the glider he'd had imported from Italy, her back to the door, looking out the large window at the rising sun. "Elena," he said, his voice raw. She didn't turn. I packed you a bag. I've transferred enough money for you to stay at the Four Seasons for a few weeks. Please don't try to contact me. Her voice was devoid of emotion. It was the calm, measured tone of a business transaction. It terrified him. Elle, please, we need to talk about this, about last night. There is nothing to talk about, she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were clear, her expression resolute. There were no tears. You showed me exactly who you are. The only thing left to discuss are the terms of our separation. Separation? No. I messed up. I know I did. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. A mistake? Which part, Julian? The affair? Or getting caught? Was it meaningless when you were sleeping with her? Was it meaningless this morning when you left our bed to meet her? This wasn't a mistake. This was a series of choices. You chose to lie. You chose to cheat. You chose to disrespect me and our marriage, and our child. She stood up, one hand on her belly. But you know what? I made choices too. I chose to stop being a victim. I chose to get a job, to feel useful again, to earn something that was mine. I chose to build a lifeboat while you were busy drilling holes in the ship. So don't you dare call this a mistake. Every word was a perfectly aimed arrow, piercing his pathetic defenses. He had no response. All his corporate negotiation tactics, his ability to charm and command, were useless here. He was stripped of his power, a king deposed in his own castle. Please, he begged, the words scraping his throat. Let me fix this. You can't, she said simply, because you don't even see what's broken. You think it's just about the affair. This, she swept her hand around the perfectly decorated, soulless room, is what's broken. We are what's broken. You stopped seeing me, Julian. I became another one of your possessions. The beautiful wife. The perfect house. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a prop. Well, the prop has quit the show. She walked past him, pausing at the door. Have your lawyer call mine. And then she was gone, leaving him alone in the gray nursery with his packed suitcase and the glittering symbol of his failure. While Julian was being cast out of his own life, Chloe Ryland was recalibrating. The initial humiliation had quickly given way to cold, strategic thinking. She was not a woman to be played for a fool. She spent the morning doing what she did best. Research. A few discreet database searches, a call to a well-placed contact in financial journalism, and the picture became terrifyingly clear. Julian Croft was a giant. But his company, Croft Innovations, was in the middle of a delicate, high-stakes merger with a Japanese tech conglomerate, Nakatomi. The deal was everything. It would make Julian a billionaire, not just a multimillionaire. And it was fragile. The Japanese partners were notoriously conservative, valuing honor and family stability above all else. A messy, public divorce, especially one involving an affair and a pregnant wife forced to work as a waitress, would be catastrophic. It would be seen as a sign of profound character failure. The deal would collapse. Chloe held a nuke, and she knew it. She didn't call Julian. She waited. 2 days later, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment. Julian got out. He looked awful. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face was pale and unshaven. The master of the universe looked like a refugee. We need to talk, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I agree, she said, leading him into her minimalist apartment. She didn't offer him a drink. She stood, arms crossed, letting him squirm. Chloe, about the other night, and about Elena. I'm ending it. The affair. It's over. I need to try and save my marriage. Chloe raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Do you really think you can? From what I saw, that ship has sailed, sunk, and is now a coral reef." She let the cruelty hang in the air before continuing. "And what about us? About what you promised me?" "What I promised you was based on a lie," he said. "This was never going to go anywhere. I'm sorry I used you." "You didn't just use me, Julian. You exposed me to your mess. But every problem is an opportunity. Isn't that what you always say?" Her tone shifted, the last trace of personal injury replaced by the sharp edge of a predator. "What do you want, Chloe?" "The Nakatomi deal," she said, her eyes glinting. "I know how fragile it is. I know what a scandal would do to it. A story like this. Tech Titan's pregnant wife serves him and his mistress at swanky eatery. The tabloids would have a field day. The Nakatomi board would run for the hills." Julian stared at her, the blood draining from his face. This was a side of her he had fostered, even admired. The ruthless ambition. Now it was aimed directly at his heart. "What do you want?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "I want in," she said. "Not as your mistress, as your partner. When the merger goes through, I don't want a promotion at my firm. I want a seat on the new board, Director of Strategic Acquisitions, a 7-figure salary, and a substantial block of founders' shares." It was an audacious, breathtaking demand. It was blackmail, pure and simple. She was leveraging his personal ruin for professional triumph. He looked at her, truly saw her for the first time. She was his reflection in a funhouse mirror, all his own ambition and moral compromise, stripped of any lingering sentiment. She was what he was becoming. He was trapped. If he refused, she would detonate the bomb, destroying his company, the culmination of his life's work. If he agreed, he would be shackled to this woman, a constant living reminder of his failure, and he would be rewarding the very behavior that had led him to this point. The battlefield had shifted. He was no longer fighting for his marriage. He was fighting for his soul. For a week, Julian lived in the gilded cage of the 4 seasons, a ghost haunting the hushed corridors. He tried to work, but the numbers on his screen swam before his eyes. The Nakatomi deal, once the singular focus of his existence, now felt like a farce. He was negotiating a multi-billion-dollar enterprise built on a foundation of integrity he no longer possessed. Chloe's demand festered in his mind. "I want in." It was a devil's bargain. He could save his empire by sacrificing the last shred of his honor. He could keep the crown by selling his soul. For a few days, the old Julian, the shark, argued the case. "Take the deal. Protect the company. Protect your legacy. Elena is gone anyway. What does it matter?" But the image of Elena in that restaurant, her quiet dignity a glaring spotlight on his own disgrace, wouldn't leave him. He thought of the baby, his child, who would one day learn about his or her father. What would that story be? A tale of a brilliant but hollow man who valued stock prices over his own family? The turning point came during a late-night call with his father, a retired history professor who lived a modest life in a small university town. Julian had always been slightly embarrassed by his father's lack of material ambition, but now he found himself craving his simple wisdom. He didn't confess everything, just that he and Elena were having serious problems. "Success is a poor teacher, son," his father said, his voice gentle through the phone. "It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. You've spent so much time building things, Julian. Your company, your fortune. Have you spent any time building yourself? Building your character?" The words hit Julian harder than any of Chloe's threats. Building your character. He had done the opposite. He had demolished it, brick by brick, in favor of a glittering facade. He made a decision. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. The next day, he called a meeting with Chloe at his temporary office. She arrived looking triumphant, carrying a leather-bound folder, no doubt containing her proposed terms. "I've thought about your offer," Julian began, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. He didn't sit behind his desk. He stood by the window, forcing them onto equal footing. "And?" she asked, a smug smile playing on her lips. "The answer is no." Chloe's smile vanished. "You're bluffing. You won't risk it." "You're right. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding risk, protecting what I've built," he said, turning to face her fully. "But I've realized I've been protecting the wrong thing. My company is just that, a company. It's code and contracts and balance sheets. If it burns, I can build another one. But my integrity, my chance to be a father my child can respect, I only get one shot at that." He walked over to his desk and picked up his phone. "You're a brilliant strategist, Chloe. You saw my weakness and you exploited it. I can't even blame you. I taught you the game. But the game is over. Your employment at Sterling Thorne is terminated, effective immediately. I've already spoken to your CEO. And as for your threats, go ahead. Tell the world. Let the Nakatomi deal collapse. Let it all burn." For the first time, Chloe looked shaken. Her leverage was based on the assumption that Julian valued his company above all else. She had miscalculated the man. "You're insane," she whispered. "You're throwing everything away." "No," Julian said, a strange sense of peace settling over him. "I'm not. I'm just starting to figure out what's actually worth keeping." He knew the fallout would be immense. But in that moment of defiance, he felt a flicker of the man he used to be. The man who wasn't afraid to risk everything for something he believed in. He had finally chosen a side. His own. His next act was harder. It required not strength, but humility. He couldn't fix his marriage with a grand gesture or a business decision. He had to address the core wound he had inflicted on Elena, her stolen identity. He spent days combing through old hard drives until he found it, her graduate school portfolio. Digital folders filled with breathtaking architectural renderings, innovative designs for community centers, sustainable housing, public libraries. It was a testament to a brilliant talent he had encouraged her to bury. He didn't call her. He knew she wouldn't take his call. Instead, he sent the portfolio to an old college friend, Marcus Thorne, now a senior partner at one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the country. He attached a short, simple note. "Marcus, this is the work of Elena Marchetti. She put her career on hold years ago. I believe that was a great loss to your field. If you see what I see, perhaps you could find a moment to speak with her. She doesn't know I'm sending this." Julian, it wasn't a handout. He couldn't buy her a career. All he could do was open a door she thought had been welded shut. It was an act of faith, a desperate hope that she would see it not as his influence, but as a testament to her own talent. A week later, Julian sat in a sterile conference room with his lawyers, preparing for the inevitable media storm. His phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello? Julian, it's Elena." His heart stopped. Her voice was cautious, hesitant. "Elena, are you okay? I got a call today. From Marcus Thorne. He wants to meet with me. He said he saw my portfolio." There was a long pause. "Was that you?" "Yes," Julian admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I wanted him to see how talented you are. It had nothing to do with me, Elle. That's all you." He could hear her take a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Why, Julian?" "Because my father asked me if I'd spent any time building my character," he said, the words tumbling out. "And I realized I'd spent all my time tearing yours down. I took that from you, Elle. Your passion, your work. I was selfish, and I was scared. Scared that your light would outshine mine, and I am so sorry for that. More sorry than I can ever say." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was the first honest sentence he had spoken to her in years. For the first time since he saw her at Aria, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to sprout in the wasteland of his life. He had demolished the fraudulent man he'd become. Now, He had to see if there was anything left in the rubble worth rebuilding. The fallout came, just as he knew it would. Chloe, scorned and furious, didn't go to the tabloids. She was too smart for that. She leaked the story through anonymous channels to a Japanese financial journal, framing it as a story of corporate instability and questionable leadership. The Nakatomi board requested an emergency meeting. Julian walked into that video conference a different man. He didn't make excuses. He didn't spin the narrative. He laid the facts bare. "What you have heard is true," he told the stone-faced board members. "My personal life is in turmoil, a situation created entirely by my own poor judgments. It has called my character into question, and you are right to be concerned. It has cost me my marriage, and it may cost me this deal. I understand that." He paused, letting the weight of his admission settle. "But I can tell you this. The man who made those mistakes is not the man leading this company forward. I was faced with a choice: to protect my company through further deceit, or to protect my integrity by accepting the consequences of my actions. I chose integrity. If that choice disqualifies me as your partner, I accept that. Croft Innovations will survive, and so will I. But I will not build our future on a foundation of lies." There was a long, tense silence. The Japanese chairman, Mr. Tanaka, a man known for his inscrutable demeanor, studied Julian through the screen. Julian braced for the killing blow. "Honor, Mr. Croft," Tanaka said finally, his English precise, "is not the absence of mistakes. It is the manner in which we own them. Your honesty today is compelling. We will proceed with the due diligence, but we will be watching you very closely." The deal wasn't dead. It was on life support, but it wasn't dead. Julian had faced the dragon and survived, not by slaying it, but by admitting he had created it. He sold the Aston Martin and the ostentatious watch. He moved out of the Four Seasons and into a small, furnished apartment. He started taking the subway to work. He was dismantling the symbols of the man he no longer wanted to be. He and Elena began to talk, not about their relationship, but about logistics, about the baby. Their conversations were stilted, cautious. He learned that she had aced her meeting with Marcus Thorne's firm. They hadn't just offered her a job. They had been so impressed with her decade-old designs and her fresh perspective that they'd offered her a position as a project lead on a new sustainable community initiative. She was alive again. Her voice had a spark he hadn't heard in years. He didn't ask to be a part of her new life. He simply supported it from the sidelines. When she mentioned needing specific drafting software for her home office, he had it delivered. No questions asked. When she talked about the strain of working and commuting, he quietly hired a car service for her, instructing the driver to be discreet. They weren't gifts to win her back. They were acts of reparation. The day Elena went into labor, she called him. Her voice was tight with pain, but clear. "It's time." He met her at the hospital. Her sister was there, shooting him looks that could curdle milk, but Elena allowed him to stay. For 18 hours, he was just Julian. Not the CEO, not the ex-husband, just a terrified, hopeful father-to-be. He got her ice chips. He held her hand when she let him. He watched in awe as she endured the pain with a strength he could scarcely comprehend. When their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect creature with a tuft of auburn hair, the nurse handed her to Elena. After a long moment, Elena looked at Julian, her eyes wet with tears and exhaustion. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" He took the small bundle into his arms, and his carefully controlled composure shattered. He wept. He wept for his own failures, for the pain he had caused, for the second chance he didn't deserve, but was being offered anyway. He looked at Elena, and for the first time she smiled at him. A real smile. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but it was a glimmer of forgiveness. A blueprint for a new foundation. They named her Hope. Months passed. The Nakatomi deal closed, securing his company's future. But Julian's focus had shifted. He left the office at 5 every day. He spent his evenings not at corporate dinners, but on the floor of Elena's apartment, playing with Hope, watching as Elena sketched at her drafting table. Their relationship was undefined, a quiet, careful reconstruction. They went for walks in the park, not as lovers, but as parents. They really talked about their fears and their dreams. He learned about her designs for a new low-income housing unit. She learned about his plans to create a foundation to fund STEM education for underprivileged girls. One evening, as he was about to leave, Elena stopped him. "The apartment next to mine is available," she said, her gaze steady. "I thought you might be interested. It would be easier." For Hope, Julian's heart swelled. It wasn't a key to her door, but it was a key to the one next to it. It was an invitation to be a neighbor, a co-parent, a partner in this new, complicated, beautiful life they were building. "I'd like that," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he now recognized as gratitude. "I'd like that very much." He hadn't won back his wife. He had lost a prop and, in the process, started to earn the respect of a partner. He had lost his soulless mansion and was being given a chance to build a home. His old life, the one he thought was the pinnacle of success, had been a gilded prison. This new life, built on the rubble of his mistakes, felt like freedom. He looked from his daughter, sleeping peacefully in her crib, to the woman he was slowly, carefully, getting to know all over again. He was no longer a millionaire who had lost his way. He was just a man, holding a blueprint, finally ready to build something that would last. The story of Julian and Elena is a powerful reminder that our lives are not defined by our successes, but by how we respond to our failures. It's a journey of betrayal and the immense power imbalance it creates. But ultimately, it's a story of redemption. It shows that true strength isn't about controlling an empire. It's about having the courage to tear down your own false constructs, to find the person you were meant to be. It's about the quiet, difficult work of rebuilding trust, not with grand gestures, but with consistent, humble acts of love and respect. If their journey from a fractured marriage to a new foundation moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of real emotional depth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories about the complexities of the human heart. What do you think is the most important element in rebuilding a broken relationship? Let us know in the comments below.
The ballroom went silent when he said the words, "I'm Ethan Carter, founder of Carter Innovations." Gas rippled through the crowd as Lauren's father froze his glass, trembling in his hand. Moments ago, he had shoved his daughter into a fountain in front of hundreds of guests, calling her a disgrace. Now the man standing beside her was one of the most powerful billionaires in America, her husband. The same daughter he'd humiliated had just turned out to be the woman everyone in the room secretly wished they were. And when Lauren lifted her chin and said calmly, "You can't embarrass me anymore," the silence was deafening. No one in Seattle forgot that night, the night the family who looked down on her finally saw who she truly was. The rain hadn't stopped all morning in Seattle. Through the misted windows of the Langston Grand Hotel, Lauren Hayes watched silhouettes of guests arriving for her sister's extravagant wedding. The city skyline blurred behind streaks of rain, a perfect reflection of how she felt inside, out of focus, out of place. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers gleamed and violins played softly over the hum of laughter. To everyone else, this was the event of the season. To Lauren, it was just another reminder that no matter how hard she worked, she would always be the outsider in her own family. Lauren had graduated top of her class at the University of Washington and joined the FBI handling major national cases before she turned 30. But none of that mattered to the Hayes family. Her father, William Hayes, a respected corporate lawyer, often dismissed her work as government busywork. Her mother, Margaret, cared only for reputation, insisting that a woman's success was measured by her husband's wealth. Then there was Chloe, beautiful, adored, perfect Chloe, the golden child who could do no wrong. And tonight she was marrying Preston Moore III, heir to one of the largest banking empires on the West Coast. Every guest seemed to adore them. Every whisper about Lauren felt sharper in comparison. Halfway through dinner, William stood to make a toast. His voice boomed across the glittering ballroom. To Chloe, he began our pride and joy, and to Preston, the man who brings stability and honor to our family name. The crowd applauded, but then his eyes found Lauren's. His smile turned cruel. And to those still searching for their place in life, he said, may they one day stop chasing fantasies and finally join the real world. A few guests chuckled uncomfortably. Chloe lowered her gaze but said nothing. The sting of humiliation burned hot in Lauren's chest. She excused herself, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she escaped into the rain-soaked courtyard. Cold drizzle brushed her face. The reflection in the fountain shimmered her face, fractured by ripples of water. For a moment she wanted to cry. Then she remembered crying was what they expected. The door creaked behind her. Her father's voice followed. Running away again, Lauren, she turned, keeping her voice steady. I just needed a minute. It's Chloe's night, not mine. You're right about that, he snapped, stepping closer. You show up late looking like you couldn't care less and then sulk like a child. You think that FBI badge makes you important? You're a disappointment to this family. Her jaw tightened. She had heard this speech all her life, but this time felt different. I didn't come here for your approval, Dad, she said quietly. I came because Mom begged me to. His jaw twitched. You've embarrassed us enough. Then in a sudden burst of anger, he shoved her shoulder. It wasn't hard, but on the slick marble, it was enough. Lauren slipped, falling straight into the fountain. The cold water knocked the breath from her lungs. Gasps echoed from the nearby balcony. Someone laughed. Cameras flashed. Her father's face turned pale. Lauren, don't you dare. But she didn't listen. She stood up slowly, her soaked dress clinging to her skin. The ballroom lights shimmered across the courtyard, catching in her wet hair. For once, she didn't care who was watching. She looked straight at her father. You can't embarrass me anymore, she said calmly. I'm done playing your scapegoat. Then she walked back through the ballroom, drenched, silent, and unflinching. Guests stepped aside, whispering as she passed. A waiter offered her a napkin. She gave a faint smile but didn't take it. Upstairs, she found a small dressing suite. She dried her hair and changed into the navy blue dress she had packed, the one she bought after her first major FBI case. She looked at herself in the mirror. This wasn't the daughter they wanted. This was the woman she had become. A knock came at the door. Olivia Moore, Preston's cousin, stood there holding a towel. Lauren, she said softly, I saw what happened. Are you okay? Lauren smiled faintly. I'm fine. Better than I've ever been. Olivia's brow furrowed. He shouldn't have done that. You didn't deserve it. Lauren nodded. It's okay. I think he just gave me the freedom I needed. Olivia tilted her head. You're not leaving, are you? Oh, I'm staying, Lauren said, her voice steady. They wanted a show. I'll give them one. Back downstairs, laughter covered tension. The music swelled again. But as the clock struck 7, something unusual happened. Several black SUVs pulled up outside the hotel. Security agents entered, scanning the room with earpieces and sharp precision. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Then through the glass doors, a tall man in a gray tailored suit stepped into the ballroom. His presence was commanding. The crowd went silent. Lauren froze. Her heart pounded. It was Ethan Carter, her husband, the billionaire founder of Carter Innovations, and her family had no idea who he was. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What would you do if the person everyone looked down on suddenly revealed a secret that could change everything? Do you think Lauren should tell her family who Ethan really is, or keep it a mystery a little longer? If you were in Lauren's place, would you walk away or stay and face them? Every head in the Langston Grand Hotel turned when Ethan Carter walked through those glass doors. The sound of the rain outside faded beneath the sudden hush that swept through the ballroom. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, forks froze above plates, and the music faltered to silence. Even the chandelier lights seemed to burn a little brighter, as if drawn to the power in his presence. Lauren's breath caught. She hadn't wanted him to come, She'd texted him to stay away. But Ethan Carter had never been a man who stood by when someone he loved was humiliated. He scanned the room, eyes sharp and focused, until he found her standing near the edge of the dance floor. Their gazes locked and the air seemed to shift. Without a word, he crossed the ballroom with quiet authority. People stepped aside instinctively, like the sea parting before a tide. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that Ethan Carter? No way, the tech billionaire. What's he doing here?" William Hayes, still holding his champagne glass, froze mid-toast. His wife Margaret looked confused. Chloe's smile flickered uncertainly, and Preston straightened his tie, trying to appear unaffected. But everyone could feel the tension growing heavier with every step Ethan took. He stopped directly in front of Lauren. She stood her ground, her chin lifted, eyes steady, even as her heart pounded in her chest. Ethan reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle but deliberate. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I told you not to come," she whispered back. "I know," he said softly, his gaze steady on hers. "But watching you get pushed into a fountain wasn't part of the plan?" The crowd gasped. A few phones went up, recording. William's face turned crimson. "You have no right to speak to my daughter like." Ethan turned, his voice calm but cutting. "Your daughter, the one you just shoved in front of 200 people? You should be the one apologizing, Mr. Hayes." Gasps spread through the crowd again. William blinked, his authority evaporating. "Who are you to talk to me like that?" Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Ethan Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Innovations." Silence fell. Every whisper died instantly. The realization hit the guests like a wave. The Ethan Carter, the man Forbes had called the most influential mind in modern tech, the self-made billionaire who could buy the hotel they were standing in 10 times over. Margaret swayed slightly, clutching her pearl necklace. Chloe's fiancé Preston tried to recover his composure, forcing a nervous laugh. "You're kidding," he said. "The Ethan Carter. Come on, this has to be some kind of joke." Ethan didn't even glance at him. "I don't joke about my wife," he said simply. A collective gasp filled the room. Cameras clicked. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Wife," she stammered. You married her." Lauren straightened, her voice calm. 3 years ago. We didn't announce it because we wanted privacy, something my family has never understood." William stared between them, speechless. "This is ridiculous. You expect us to believe?" At that moment, a new voice interrupted. "Deputy Director Hayes, we need you for confirmation." Heads turned as 2 agents in dark suits approached from the entrance, badges flashing. The taller one nodded to Lauren with quiet respect. "Ma'am, we've secured the perimeter. We just need your authorization to proceed." A murmur spread through the guests. "Deputy Director Lauren." Her father's jaw fell open. "Deputy," what? He choked. Lauren reached into her clutch, withdrew her identification, and handed it to the agents. "You have it," she said, her voice steady. "Proceed with Phase 2. The agents nodded and left just as quickly as they had come. The entire room was buzzing now. Whispers, disbelief, awe. Margaret was the first to speak. "Deputy Director Lauren." "What are they talking about?" Lauren turned to face her family. "I didn't tell you because it wouldn't have mattered. You never cared what I achieved. But yes, I'm the youngest Deputy Director of Counterintelligence in the Seattle division of the FBI." The silence that followed was heavy. Her father's hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. Chloe looked pale. Preston's smirk had completely vanished. Ethan placed a supportive hand on her back. "She's the best agent they've got," he said proudly. "And you should be thanking her. Half the things that keep this country safe have her fingerprints on them." Lauren took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to prove anything. I came because I thought maybe for once we could just be a family. But I see now it's impossible to be seen by people who refuse to look." Margaret stepped forward, tears gathering in her eyes. "Lauren, we didn't know." Lauren cut her off, her voice calm but resolute. "You never asked." The weight of her words lingered in the air. William opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in her life, he seemed small. Ethan gently took her hand. "You ready to go?" Lauren hesitated. The same guests who had once whispered about her now watched in stunned silence, admiration replacing pity. She looked back at her father one last time. "I hope one day you understand that I didn't need your approval," she said. "Just your respect." And with that, she walked out beside Ethan. The cameras followed, capturing the image of the drenched daughter who'd been mocked at her sister's wedding, now walking away with the most powerful man in the room. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and for the first time, Lauren felt like she could breathe. As they reached the car, Ethan opened the door for her. "You know," he said softly, "you didn't have to face them alone." "I did," she replied, "because if I didn't do it today, I never would." He smiled, admiration in his eyes. "That's why I married you." She leaned against him, finally letting herself smile. "You always had terrible timing, you know that." "Maybe," he said, kissing her forehead, "but you've got to admit it was one hell of an entrance." Inside the car, as the city lights faded behind them, Lauren realized something profound. For years, she had been waiting for her family to see her. Tonight, the world had. But most importantly, she finally saw herself. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What would you have done if you were in Lauren's place, walked away, or forgiven them on the spot? Do you think her father will ever truly change? If someone doubted your worth for years, would you try to prove them wrong, or just live your life freely like Lauren did? Weeks passed after the wedding scandal, but Seattle hadn't stopped talking. News outlets replayed the footage of Lauren Hayes standing drenched yet defiant in the Langston Grand Ballroom. The daughter her powerful family had dismissed now revealed as a high-ranking FBI officer and the wife of billionaire Ethan Carter. It was the kind of story the media loved, poetic, shocking, cinematic. But for Lauren, it was more than that. It was liberation. She spent the following days buried in work, leading a high-stakes cyber investigation. Ethan supported her, quietly respecting her need for space. At night, they would sit on the terrace of their lakeside home, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. She found peace there, not in fame or redemption, but in the quiet moments when no one expected her to prove anything. Still, the wound left by her family lingered. She hadn't spoken to them since the wedding. Her mother had sent one hesitant email full of excuses, not apologies, and her father had stayed silent. But one evening, as Lauren reviewed case files at home, her phone rang. The caller ID made her freeze. William Hayes. For a long moment, she considered ignoring it. Then she exhaled and answered. "Hello, Lauren." His voice came quieter than she remembered. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but your mother hasn't been well. The stress, it's been too much." Lauren closed her eyes, conflicted. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said softly. He hesitated. "She keeps talking about you, about how proud she is, even if she never said it right." There was a pause, years of anger, pain, and silence pressed between them. "Dad," she said carefully, "if you're calling to make peace, do it for the right reasons, not because the world's watching." "I'm not," he said after a moment. "I'm calling because I was wrong. About everything. You've done more for this country, for people, than I ever will. I was too proud to see it." His voice cracked slightly. "I missed my daughter." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to be angry, but the truth was she'd wanted to hear those words her whole life. "Then stop missing her," she whispered. "Start being her father again." A week later, Lauren visited their family home for Sunday dinner. The atmosphere was fragile, uncertain. The grand dining room that had once echoed with judgment now felt smaller, quieter. Margaret greeted her with tears and trembling hands. Chloe hugged her awkwardly, her eyes filled with something that looked like guilt. "I saw what they said about you on TV," Chloe murmured. "You didn't deserve any of that. I should have stood up for you." Lauren smiled gently. "It's in the past. What matters is that we do better moving forward." Dinner was hesitant but honest. Her father didn't try to dominate the conversation for once. Instead, he listened. When Lauren talked about her work, he asked questions, real questions, not to criticize but to understand. And when she mentioned Ethan, her mother smiled for the first time that night. "He's a good man," Margaret said quietly. "He reminds me of your grandfather, the only one who ever dared to challenge your father." Everyone laughed softly, tension breaking just a little. After dinner, as they stood in the garden, William turned to her. "Lauren," he said, voice steady but remorseful, "I can't change what I did, but I can start by saying what I should have said that night. I'm sorry. for pushing you, for belittling you, for not seeing who you are. She nodded, her throat tight. Thank you. That's all I ever needed to hear. From that night forward, things didn't magically heal, but they began to grow. William joined therapy to manage his temper. Margaret started volunteering with a local charity instead of chasing social events. Chloe surprisingly became one of Lauren's closest allies, often calling her for advice and visiting her office for lunch. And Lauren, for the first time, allowed herself to forgive, not for their sake, but for her own peace. Months later, she and Ethan hosted a small dinner at their home overlooking Lake Union. The guest list was simple: her family, a few close friends, and some of Ethan's colleagues. It wasn't about status or appearances. It was about second chances. As the sunset painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, her father raised a glass. To Lauren, he said, voice steady, for teaching us that strength isn't loud and that love doesn't need approval to be real. Everyone applauded. Lauren's eyes met Ethan's across the table. He smiled, that same warm, steady smile that had grounded her through everything. Later that night, standing on the terrace, Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist. "You did it," he murmured. Lauren leaned back against him, watching the stars reflect off the water. "No," she said softly. "We did it. You believed in me when no one else did." He kissed her hair. "You didn't need me to believe in you, Lauren. You just needed to see what was already there." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Maybe. But it helps having someone who sees you, not what you were not, what people said you should be, but who you really are." That night, the laughter from inside the house spilled out into the cool Seattle air. Her family wasn't perfect, they never would be, but they were trying, and sometimes that was enough. Because forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It rebuilds trust, one small act at a time. Lauren closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I'm finally home. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future." If this story touched your heart, what part moved you the most? Do you believe people who hurt you can truly change if they try? If you felt inspired by Lauren's courage, comment the number 100 below. Tell us which country you're watching from. And don't forget to share this story with someone who believes in second chances.